Jalandoni, if I even
Jalandoni.
What?
Jalandoni.
Jalandoni. I knew I was going to get it wrong. I should have asked.
That's all right. It's been a while.
See, now I remember, because before we get into you used to actually sometimes produce the DVD Tuesday segment on Attack of the Show.
Yeah, and movie junkets. We've been on some junkets together.
That happened.
That did happen.
Oh my God. So let's talk about like your entryway into Attack of the Show.
The way I got into the way I found and discovered Attack of the Show was pretty much similar to everyone else. I was I was flipping through channels on TV, and I came across this really cool, irreverent, funny pop culture show that related to me, to gamers, to the nerds, to the Star Wars fan, to the Marvel person in me. I was already working in production as a producer, but I was mostly working on like entertainment news shows. I'd worked on a bunch of shows for E!, a bunch of shows for TV Guide, and those were more of the celebrity pop type shows. But what drew me to Attack of the Show was that, like I just said, it was for our culture, for the geek culture, for the things I cared about. And so, I just knew that, if I'm going to keep working in production, I want to work on this show. So, back in the day, had to use like certain websites, always looking for job posts. And one time it popped up an associate producer position for Attack of the Show. I applied. I remember writing the cover letter, geeked out, talked about playing World of Warcraft, whatever it was back in the day. I wrote about it, and I got called in for an interview. And this was at the old building, not the one the one off Olympic. I went in. I met with Joshua, Vinny, and Gavin. Thought it went great. They said, "Okay, great. We'll be in touch." Never heard from them. Nothing. I followed up. Zero. So I said, "All right, move on." So I kept working in production. Still watching G4. Wasn't like disheveled. I said, "Okay, maybe it wasn't the right time." And then a few years later, segment producer position came up, but this time I had a couple other friends who were working on the show. Still kept in touch. Let me go back. Still a fan of the show. Even then, and then through other friends, I was brought on to the feedback loop as like a guest fan correspondent to do the show. They had brought me on twice to talk about, I think back in the time, Battlestar Galactica or the new Nintendo Wii games. So like I said, I was just happy to be a part of the show. And then finally a segment producer position popped up. And this time came back in, obviously, and then they already remembered me. It was Gavin, Joshua, and Vinny were still there. And then finally that time it came around. And so I started as a segment producer starting in 2008. And I was there until 2012, left right after Kevin Pereira's last show.
No, what's interesting is I kind of feel like you could have done on-camera stuff. I mean, you have you're a good-looking guy. You could have been on camera if you wanted to. You just prefer behind the scenes. I prefer behind the scenes myself, but
yeah. You know what? I like I said, doing the feedback loop, which I'll send you clips of that you can use for my first appearance. Doing the feedback loop was fun, but whenever I get into like acting or trying to perform, I get a little anxiety. So I just feel like you, I feel more comfortable behind the camera than instead of front. I'd rather have a headset on.
Well, first of all, we are going to use that footage. We need to get that.
Okay, yeah.
So, I'll follow up. I've been following up with everybody and just like, hey, here's like a release date sign. Here's like, we need like a couple of photos. I've got some good ones of Robert Juster. And then I want to get your address because I'm sending everyone involved something.
Okay, cool.
I'll keep that in suspense.
All right.
And now a lot of the questions I'm asking, I kind of already know the answer to, but I want to hear in your words, like, what was the culture like around Attack of the Show? Like when you went into work, what kind of people were you surrounded by, specifically at G4 and Attack of the Show? What kind of people worked there?
The kind of people that worked at G4 and Attack of the Show were the people that you felt at home with, the people that you could relate with. The thing I loved about that place, and I still compare it to every other place I worked with, is that we all had something in common. Everyone in every department at G4, we all had some sort of common bond, whether it was, comic books, video games, sneakers, anything like that. It was just different because we were all in the same vibe. You can have your own personal preferences, but no matter what, just you found a common ground with everyone who worked there. And I think also the ideology at G4, or especially on Attack, is that crew became like a second family to me. It was a band of brothers, because doing a live daily show was a grueling task, but you felt like you were in part of like sort of a fraternity, or it's like a second family with people who we all knew. We just had to work hard, get the job done, and then at the end of the day, we can laugh about it, we can bond, and then move on, because the next day, then you have to worry about the next day. So, I look back at those memories and the bonds I created, friendships I created. I still keep in touch with people every day, because not only did we have a good time, but I also look back at anyone else who has worked at G4 and on the Attack of the Show, and I know what they're capable of. I trust that they can do the work, because we all sort of were in the trenches together, so to speak.
I agree. Like, it's one of the things where it's just like, first of all, best television experience I ever had personally. And I think and I had already done a lot of television previous to that and was sort of like burnt out. Like, I kind of didn't want to do it anymore. It was Gavin who convinced me to come on. I won't bore you right now because you'll see the movie, but like, it was the best. And I felt really bad, because I felt that a lot of the people there, it was their first television experience. It was kind of like my last and best, and not quite my last, but I was like, oh my God, this is the best you're ever going to have it. It's only downhill from here. It really was like, I don't know that there was an appreciation for how good it was, that there were this many people so committed to the same goal. It was. Yeah. Tell me about some of the sort of historical things that you were witness to. You say you were there on Kevin's last day. Mm-hmm. You could describe Kevin's last day. Were there some firsts, or like historical, like, oh wow, this was Olivia's last day, or Olivia's first day, or this person's, like, are there some in the history of G4? Are there some sort of seminal moments that you were witness to, and what can you tell me about those moments? I mean, tell me about one. I'm trying to jog your memory right now.
Yeah. Let's end with we can end with Kevin's last day. I was trying to go in order. So when I came on to Attack of the Show, it was around 2008. So it was Olivia's second year, I believe it was Olivia's second or third year, and 2 years before Candace. So during my period, when I got there, I think that's when we started seeing Chris Hardwick more often. He was coming in. I was there for Candace Bailey's when she took over the reins as a co-host. I remember doing the big, reveal for Candace. It involved stormtroopers, which I believe Bruce Green and I had to dress up with, along with the 501st, to help carry Candace in on one of those things you call whatever you call it. I remember that. I remember Epic April, which was like the big promotional month for sweeps, where we each had to do everything epic. It was like epic this, epic that. We had huge stunts that we had to prepare for. I remember the pizzathon that we tried to pull off, where for Epic April, where fans were going to call in and we would buy them a pizza and order them, not knowing that the phone lines would be shut down because too many people were calling. So we had to figure something out. I remember the 1000th episode. That was a big deal. Kevin and Olivia jumping into the pie. I think that's probably one of the seminal moments. I was involved opening cans of pudding and dumping it into the pie tin. So I remember that. Also, some of the other stuff. I remember being there when James Cameron was in studio and he took a chair to destroy Uncle Ted. So many great moments, ranging from Comic-Cons to E3 to CES. Some of the other moments, Olivia's Playboy cover reveal. I remember that was a big deal for the show. And then, also Kevin's last day, which, it was a very emotional day. It was definitely was the end of an era. But it was like one last ride for his son. I was in charge of producing Kevin's last E3 promo, which was a 7-minute single shot tracking segment where it started in the studio. Kevin walks out of the studio, a bunch of interactions going on. For some reason, we do a parody of The Deer Hunter, and then he go into the dressing room where Kevin, uses resuscitates a patient back to life. We come back in. He kicks through fake glass, comes back into the studio. We have a live kangaroo there for whatever reason that Kevin tries to pet, but the sparklers and the fireworks in the studio scared the kangaroo, and it almost kicked Kevin. Then it ends with more fireworks and an acrobat doing rolling backwards, and then kind of just a big E3 banner falling down. So I just remember that as sort of being my last segment I ever produced with Kevin. And like I said, it was like a very emotional moment, but those were just some that I can think of. I mean, there are just so many more that just come up, throughout that just kind of come up, and you remember those times, and they were all pretty much funny, good times.
Well, let's take a deeper dive into a couple of those. You mentioned James Cameron. Sure. His appearance is, people still talk about James Cameron's appearance on Attack of the Show to today. Can you tell me what that was like were you afraid someone was going to get hurt? Like, kind of walk us through that, what happened.
Sure. I believe Sean Jordan was producing his segment. So, and as you know, on Attack of the Show, there was no live audience. So the producers and PAs and interns and whoever is available had to be in the studio, and we called ourselves flaffers, fake laughers. Not that we were faking it, but we'd throw in an extra chuckle or two, just to help out the segment or the host. So I just remember being in studio there watching Cameron's segment, and the conceit was he was supposed to take one of the metal chairs and smack and destroy Uncle Ted or a dummy or something like that. And it's just the fact that it's James Cameron, one of the best directors, in this generation. He created the Terminator series, Avatar. It was just awe-inspiring to see someone of that level in our studio, and just the fact that here's one of the top directors in his field, and he's on our show, and he's taking a metal chair to a dummy, and just thinking, how just ridiculous and hilarious and how awesome it was at the time.
Tell me about Candace's first day. You said you dressed up as a stormtrooper and brought her out on like a dais or something. Isn't that what it's a dais? Yeah. So because
parapet,
something like that. I was actually involved in the video that they shot at the BDSM parlor, where they did this video that kind of like revealed that she would be the new host. I was supposed to go there, and I didn't know who I was going to see. I just was told to go to location, which was very weird. Then they dressed me up in some sort of like out. There was a serious rumor that I played Boba Fettish on the show, which was very fun. Oddly, I did not. I'm sure but So I was dressed up in this thing, and then Candace had to whip this person, which was revealed to be me, which was supposed to be weird. But so that's how I found out. Sure. Can you tell me even like before like the on-camera reveal, what was kind of the thinking behind the scenes of like how we're going to get, because I know there were a lot of female hosts that were kind of like tested. What led to Candace? And then tell me about that day. Tell me about that day where you got to dress as a stormtrooper, which is probably pretty darn fun. So
sure. So after Olivia had left, Attack was looking to replace her with a female co-host. And so I remember that summer, for the next couple months, we were on a rotating basis, just, audition, in a sense, live screen testing, other co-hosts and putting them through the ringer. And so when it was announced within the network that they were going to go with Candace, they wanted to do a whole week of building her up, kind of giving her a boot camp, a nerd boot camp, or trials to, so that she could become, and we would announce her as the co-host. So I do remember like some of those, trials was she had to build a Lego Death Star with everyone. She had to go through some sort of like zombie training, I think, unless that was a Comic-Con package. And other things like that. And it eventually ended with us bringing her out on a parapet. We had brought on the 501st to help supply the Stormtrooper costumes. And she sat in the parapet, and then, we were in there. And then, so the public didn't know that we were going to make Candace or they were going to announce it. So I just remember, once again, AOTS producers are also your stand-ins and extras and actors and all the other segments. So I just remember saying hi to her, putting on my Stormtrooper helmet, and then we had to bring her out to the set, place her down, and then that was sort of like the big announcement, big hurrah.
That's awesome. Oh man. Yeah. It was fun to be a part of that, and then to see her kind of grow on the show.
Yeah.
But tell me about some of the Olivia moments. You mentioned the pie. Mm-hmm. Everyone mentioned the pie. There's the hot dog. Like, can you tell me like sort of the highlights of Olivia Munn that you were personally witness to, and then any sort of anecdotes that might, elaborate on what it was like, to be around that chemistry that I believe that Kevin and Olivia had, that was just palpable. I mean, they were opposite. They complemented each other, and they had like opposite strengths, which I think just made them the perfect hosting package. Give me some of those highlights on what your personal insights are from that.
Sure. So what drew me to Attack of the Show in the first place was the chemistry between Olivia Munn and Kevin Pereira. There was just something about Olivia, like definitely a je ne sais quoi of, something that attracted you to watch her and just see her do ridiculous stuff on Attack of the Show. After working with Olivia for a few years, she was always game for anything. She always did it for the show. So you could pitch her anything, and she, as long as it was funny and within the show, she was game for it. Whether it was doing a random segment with a guest interview, or playing trivia with a guest, or having her eat, marshmallow peeps, stuffing them in her mouth just for an ATN bit. She was always down to do it, and I think that's kind of what. That's kind of what made her special on this show. She wasn't just there as a co-host; she was a part of the show. And seeing her interact with Kevin, they were definitely sort of like the brother and sister you would like to watch on a show, and watch them fight, watch them laugh. Just seeing their chemistry is something that you couldn't recreate, or be very hard to recreate. I'm just trying to think. Yeah. And as well as, also working on set, like, especially like sketches, that's where sort of like Olivia, kind of shined. You told her, hey, you're going to dress up as a Lady Wolverine. She would do it. Hey, Comic-Con, we got to do 20 costume changes within the show. She was down for it. And like I said, it paid off. It was hilarious. And I think that's kind of what, drove the show.
Let's talk about Kevin, which I've often said. I've said it anytime anyone's ever asked, the best person I've ever worked with in television. I always found him to be kind of a instigator. Mm-hmm. He was an instigator, and I think the best way, at least the way I observed it, was I felt like he was the Bugs Bunny of the show. And his job, his role was to mess with everyone and get them to really step up their game. I know the best I was ever on television is when I was, on camera with Kevin. Like, he really just upped the game and just made things difficult. And I mean that in a good way. Yeah. Made it difficult so that I would step up and try to match his energy. And what was weird was he would talk so fast. There would just be like jokes and jokes and jokes and jokes that just went by where I'm like, wait, I'm processing the one that you just said 2 times ago. What are you doing?
Right.
But can you talk about the experience of what it was like to work with Kevin? Because I also know behind the scenes, he was also very serious minded. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I always got the sense that he took his work seriously, but he didn't take himself seriously. So can you just tell me a bit about, from your perspective? That's my perspective, being on camera with him. But what are your thoughts on Kevin and maybe sort of his best moments? And then go a little deeper on what happened that first day and what the energy was like on set.
Sure. So my experience for the past with those 4 years working with Kevin were great. Kevin is utmost professional behind the scenes, and then on camera, he is himself. He started out with the show. He grew up with it. He knew the process. He was originally a PA before he became on-air talent. And so he kind of understood what made the show, or actually how the sausage was made. So he was never trying to go against it, because, working with producers and, the dynamic between producers and talent, it's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of, like, well, we can't do that because of this, or, or that's kind of hard to do, so we can't do that. But Kevin understood. I think that's what made him special for this show, is that he already knew the process because he was there. So he knew what was possible in the show, and then what you could do. Hold on, I gotta switch my earpods. So, but that being said, Kevin, coming into Attack of the Show, the studio was Kevin's playground. It was his show. Yes, it was him and Olivia that created, or that drove the show. But Kevin took the brunt force of it. He's sort of the soul of Attack of the Show, which is kind of why after he took off, I think that's where everyone kind of saw, the ship starting to sink, because, without him, that's kind of what was part of the magic of the show. But I just, like working with Kevin, whether it was in the studio or reading VO or going on field segments with him, Kevin always understood the work. He cared about it, but at the same time, he knew sort of, he would be the directorial voice of what the show should be, what his brand should be, and, just how to make it work. Whether it's, producing guest interviews, he would always find that question or that thing to elevate the segment, to make it better, to make it more, quote, attack. He was always trying to strive and to make it a better show.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think that he was just committed. I mean, to me, he was the show. And I felt the same way, that when he left, I felt like it's over. You know what I mean? It's over.
Yeah.
And God, it was less than a year, right? That's a whole other thing to get into. But talk to me a little bit about some of the other people that were on the show that I know you had an experience to work with. And also, I have experienced that problem with the AirPods, where they last a good 2 years. I feel like every Apple product is made to last 2 years, with the exception of maybe their MacBook Pros. But every other Apple product is like, this is going to work great for 2 years.
And then you're going to have to buy the next model.
We get the next one. Yeah. Right. So, and I have those AirPods too. I actually prefer the older ones, like you've got in your ear right now. I think but
yeah. So I'm doing the switch off of like charge one, swap it, charge the other.
I've done that very same thing myself. It's frustrating, but it works. Yeah. That plan works. Tell me about some of the other people that worked on the show. I mean, Allison Hayslip, sure. Hardwick, other stories that you have about some of the other, on-camera talent and what the experience was. I mean, I found like Sarah Underwood, like she was game for whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
Among others, if you have any things, some anecdotes or stories about what it was like to work with some of the other talent aside from Kevin and Olivia.
Yeah. So, besides Kevin and Olivia, all the other G4 talent, having them come on, I got to see most of them, as they started out on the show, and just worked with them throughout the years and become friends with them. I remember when we started bringing on Allison Hayslip to do field packages. And then, and then eventually she got more incorporated into the segments. And that's kind of where we got involved, or producers got involved, starting to work with them. It's like here's a new fun person to kind of, not exactly a toy, but sort of kind of like, oh, cool. What can we do with Allison in this segment? Oh, great. Allison's on Gadgetron. What can I do to make this fun? So same thing, did a lot of junkets with Allison. So we got to hang out a lot, in hotels waiting to talk to actors and actresses. Working with her was always a blast. Blair Herter, same thing. Most people knew him from Road Rules and MTV, but then just getting to hang out with him, finding out his interests and realizing he's a bigger nerd than I was also, a fun experience, as well as like seeing Chris Hardwick kind of like his surge in popularity. This was at a time before Chris had created the Nerdist brand, before he was hosting TV Talking Dead. And it was kind of funny, just bringing him on. Oh, Chris Hardwick's going to do the tech review. Okay, cool. Other than that, most people may only remember Chris from Singled Out. And, just kind of watch Chris Hardwick, grow, launch his the Nerdist Network and his podcast. That was like a fun experience. And then as well as Sarah Underwood, here's this girl who, so she was a Playboy model. She had done some stuff, but now they want to bring her on. And we really got to watch her come out of her shell. It's funny when you watch Sarah. I produced Sarah's first interview. She was a guest, before we even decided on bringing her on. She was a guest. She was on America. She was doing something for American Ninja Warrior. Just watching her, she was all nice and sweet. But then as she got on the show, she became more comfortable and she became her sort of silly and funny self. And, that was like another experience. And the thing about this is like when you work with this talent and host, it wasn't like you just, at the end of the day, you don't see him. We end up at the same parties together or the same events. And then, so you get to know not only the talent, at work, but like, at home. Like basically Allison Hayslip lived down the street from my apartment. So it wasn't like, we'd never see her out the door. It was like, oh, okay, we'll see you at Ralph's. So, or, any of the other talent. So like I said, it was a great experience watching, getting to be a part of their lives and seeing where sort of how their career shaped and ended up after the show.
Tell me about what you would describe from your perspective, like the best of Attack of the Show, and then maybe like a worst moment, like a bit that went wrong. Like, oh, yeah. And I know that there were, from talking to people, there are many where it's like, well, the plan was this, but I almost feel like whenever a bit went wrong, it actually like. Whenever a bit went wrong, like there'd be a way that would be spun because it's live TV to make it actually entertaining. So can you talk about, at least from your memory, like what some of the best, like that bit went off flawlessly and it was perfect or whatever, and then like something that just went awry that ended up maybe turning out fun anyways?
Yeah, so the thing about Attack of the Show is there were a lot of great ideas for sketches and stunts, but I would say more often than not they would not turn out as expected. One of the segments that I produced during Epic April was this pizzathon, and so it was the conceit was we're going to buy a bunch of pizza gift cards, have viewers call in, much like a telethon, and we would get their information and order them a pizza. So it took months of preparation. We built like stands into the studio. We got little risers. We had pizzathon t-shirts. We set up phone lines. We had the gift cards ready, and we were going to literally take phone calls from fans during that period of time, order a pizza to their house, and keep track of the pizza. Kevin and Olivia were in tuxedos. We were going to make a whole big event of that. During the show, and this was all behind the scenes that no one knew of. During the show, there were so many fans calling in that we could not take any more orders. None of the fans could get through. The phone lines are shut down, but it was literally after probably the first block of the show. So we decided to just keep on going and fake the pizzathon while taking down any information that we could and getting pizza and still ordering the pizzas out to those remaining people. But I just remember it was that oh shit moment of all this work of preparation, and it just goes out the door because something that was out of our control. We didn't have any, or our IT department wasn't expecting this amount of calls, or it also just shows to the popularity of the show or the fandom. So we didn't expect what to happen, and so instead we just went along with it. And I guess to this day until now, no one knew the better. But also, like, there were so many other moments where they would maybe the intent didn't come out right, or the sketch. A lot of them came from the around the net sketches. Always coming out of that number one video, we'd try like a really quick sketch or something stunt to happen, and like I said, more often than not, they would fail, and then it was up to sort of the flaffers in studio to kind of keep laughing and keep it going. But I think that's kind of what made the show special. It was, we were sort of the little engine that could. We didn't have Saturday SNL's art department helping us create all these props and gifts. We had a dedicated art department, but we just didn't have the budget. So sometimes when something would just like fall apart, or it's like, oh, that's just a squirrel on a cardboard box. That's what I feel kind of gave Attack of the Show that charm of, listen, we're going to try it. And if it fails, oh well, because you know what, you can't worry about it because the next day there's another show.
It's funny because that homemade quality of it, I think, is what that aspect of it is what inspired a lot of people to, become creatives on YouTube. I feel like that really inspired a whole generation on YouTube. Let's talk about the legacy of Attack of the Show as you switch your microphone.
Yeah,
and
as I go to left,
AirPods. Let's talk about the legacy and the influence that Attack of the Show had. I mean, Gavin Purcell was famously plucked from Attack of the Show to work on Jimmy Fallon's show, and I feel a good number of YouTubers were inspired to say, well, I know a lot about comics, or I know a lot about movies or video games. I can just talk about it with some cheap set, right? Do you have some perspective on the influence of Attack of the Show on fandom that kind of went off to become creatives in their own right? Like, because at the time Attack of the Show was on, I mean, you couldn't upload more than 10 minutes to YouTube, right? YouTube was in its infancy. It was really just getting going. And, Attack was kind of the only one covering pop culture with a level of seriousness and with a sense of humor. No one was doing that. Like, zero television shows were doing that. So do you have some perspective on the influence that the show has had on pop culture and the creatives that have come after it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the legacy of Attack of the Show has had a huge impact on content creation today. After I left Attack of the Show, no matter where I went or whenever it was brought up in discussion, people have always mentioned how much they love the network, how much they love the show, especially from the gaming esports community. That's what they watched. That was their jam, and just the fact that like it still resonated and that it still gave them something. People were always saying, oh, I can't wait till they bring it back. Oh, wouldn't it be great if they bring it back? So it just shows the kind of impact that I felt sort of also influenced, content creation today. Let's look at Golden Boy. He's an example of where, he was a huge fan of the show, and now, and now he gets to be a part of it. And I think that's what this new generation is. They saw Attack of the Show growing up. Now here's their, chance become a part of it, and or what can I take from it to make my own show? To make a Marvel comparison, Attack of the Show in G4 was basically the super soldier serum. And although people have tried to replicate it, because they want that back, it was never the same. So it really stands a testament to sort of what we created back in the day and what the network had at the time.
I love the super soldier analogy. It was sort of the impetus. It was, hey, truthfully, if you look back, like many of the people who were on camera talent on Attack of the Show had no aspirations to be on camera. I mean, myself among them. I kind of fell into television, and the more I resisted it, the more I got hired, which is weird. But, I just didn't care, and I feel that much of the talent, probably with the exception of like Olivia, who wanted to be on TV, a lot of the other people on the show didn't really aspire to be on television. They just knew, I know a lot about comic books.
I'll come talk about it. Yeah.
Blair Butler. Yeah. Like, do you have any comment on that aspect of a lot of the hosts just being a lot of the hosts were not classically trained for television. And I think at the end of the day, that ends up being a good thing in the long run. So speak to that, if you would.
Sure. Yeah, I think part of the authenticity of G4 and Attack of the Show was that the people we brought on were passionate about what they were talking about, and not necessarily I just want to be on the show just to be on TV and to see myself. It was, I am the expert on movies and DVDs. I am a comic book expert. I really do love this tech and want to talk about it. And so bringing on your Blair Butlers or Chris Gore or Chris Hardwick or Matt Myra to talk about the things that they cared about, it just showed to the fans that, listen, we're not just trying to fake it. These are the people you should listen to, not because they're on TV, but because they know what they're talking about. So I think that's kind of what kept Attack of the Show cool and gave it its credibility, especially at Comic-Con or E3. We're not bringing on people who just want to be the spokesperson for their video games. We're bringing on the developers who love the game. We're bringing on the comic book creators. We're bringing on the actors who love Comic-Con and love the cosplay. And that's kind of why what I feel like made G4 so special back in the day.
You brought up Comic-Con. Funny story. I had to take time off from Attack of the Show to go to Comic-Con because I'd been going since like 1989. Right. I first moved to LA. I just go to Comic-Con every year. So I talked to Gavin Purcell. I said, look, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do a DVD Tuesday. Can we pre-tape it? I got to go to this thing called Comic-Con. And Gavin Purcell said to me, is that a convention for comedians? I said, no. San Diego Comic-Con is about comic books and pop culture. And, you really should go down there. So in 2005, it was just like they just did a field piece. They took Gavin down and then they did some field pieces. And when we got back, Gavin was like, hey, that was like, holy shit, we should be doing that every year. Yeah. I feel that to mainstream culture who didn't really know what Comic-Con was, G4 put Comic-Con on the map. Like really, that's where it began to blow up in a mainstream way, because previous to G4 going to Comic-Con, if you spotted a woman walking at Comic-Con, it would be like seeing Bigfoot. It was very rare to see a woman at San Diego Comic-Con. And now the audience is very 50-50. If you go to a comic convention now, there are just as many female fans as there are male fans. I blame Marvel movies for that. Because, it's all about the beefcake for the male characters in Marvel movies.
Right, you're Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, you're contractually obligated to take your shirt off. So, yeah. Funny enough, women tend to like that. But anyways, what was it like to see the show grow? Because I remember being a part of those shows, and G4 grew and then helped grow at least the mainstream public awareness. Because after that, Entertainment Tonight was coming to Comic-Con. Comic-Con kind of blew up in a way that, for good or bad, had mainstream awareness, just like Sundance, the Sundance Film Festival, which I've been going to since the 90s. I'm sorry this is so long. I'm trying to put this into context. But it's like, these things that kind of only the people that are in the industry know about, that suddenly everyone knows about. G4 and Attack of the Show in particular, with the live shows, so like the weekend of live programming, like blew that up.
Yeah.
So can you talk about like what the experience was of doing those San Diego Comic-Con shows were, what the difficulties were, maybe reveal some secrets? Like, for example, everyone in cosplay that were the audience were hired cosplayers. That's why the cosplay was so good. And also they wouldn't do anything crazy. The little mosh pit of audience were
stand-ins.
They were legit cosplayers. I mean, they were, real in that sense, but they were hired to be an audience, a professional audience, so they wouldn't like rush the stage or do something crazy to Kevin or Olivia, right? Like, but kind of reveal some secrets about the San Diego Comic-Con coverage and how that's like coincided, the ascent of Attack of the Show with the ascent of the mainstream awareness of San Diego Comic-Con as an event.
What I think G4 and Attack of the Show did for Comic-Con was sort of taking it out of the shadows, making it cool to be there, showing sort of the world or showing the audiences that, hey, this is fun, this is cool, we are here now, you want to be here. And I think that's what Attack of the Show did better. That's what I think G4 did best about these events that, sort of mainstream media didn't really realize. Because before then, Comic-Con was probably only covered by a San Diego local news person standing outside the convention center saying, oh, this is crazy, there's a lot of people here, versus versus actually doing coverage, which I think also kind of coincided with studios, television networks and movie studios realizing sort of like, hey, if there are people here, we should have a presence here to help build our movie, to help build our project, to help build whatever. And sort of G4 kind of grew along with that surge of needing to be at Comic-Con for whatever reasons whatsoever. And it was just a great experience. Before, I'd only been to Comic-Con once. And thanks to G4, I had done 4 basically tours at Comic-Con. And it was always a grueling, stressful, and yet fun experience. And, I loved coming back every year. It take producing a normal Attack of the Show episode, but confining it to that small stage with sort of limited space, and also just on a heightened schedule, right? You're working in the trailers, then you got to come out to the production truck, then you got to run all the way from Hall H to the stage within 5 minutes because your next segment's coming up, or it's something happens, backstage, or it's all there. All the celebrities are there, and everyone's there for the same reason. I just remember being on the bottom floor, waiting for our guests to come up so we can bring them up to the top stage of the show. And there I am, just hanging out with Jon Favreau, talking about Iron Man, and then also producing, and then also telling them, okay, you're up in 5 minutes to go talk about your next movie. Or just seeing other celebrities walking by and realizing, hey, it's G4, hey, it's Attack of the Show. And just knowing that sort of in our world, in this world of Comic-Con or in this world of pop culture, we had kind of put our foot stamp and placed our mark as like, we are the ones who know how to cover this. Come watch us.
What do you think that Attack of the Show can be done the way it was done back then? Could you do that today? And when you look back at like the kind of things that were done on the show, can you do that? Can you do some of that now? Like I know we talked about this before we started recording, but like, can you do what Attack of the Show was then? Can you do that now?
Yeah, I think if, I think with, wait, hold on, sidebar. Do we want to talk about that Attack of the Show's coming back, or is this just more of the old Attack of the Show?
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I guess my question is like, in putting together the library, because we built our own library, like it's like host based. We have like the best of Anna David. You know what I mean? Like we've got we built. That was my first thing, is we have to build an archive, because you can't make an archival documentary without building the archive. So I know what we have, but like I look at a lot of these segments and I'm like, if Kevin said that or tweeted that, he would be, they'd go after. It'd be canceled. So that's, I think, what my meaning is.
Gotcha.
Is, can you do what Attack was today? I mean, and of course this doc is being done in the context of, we know Attack the show's coming back, but it's not going to be the old show. We all know that. Yeah. It's going to be a new thing, but also like, hey, Star Trek: The Next Generation was pretty awesome, and it was its own thing. Mm-hmm. So I actually believe that once they get started, I think the new Attack the show is going to be just as beloved, but by a different generation of people, just as Star Trek was. So So that is what it is. Just like they change the Doctor Who every 5 years, But tell me, could you do some of the things that you did back then? Could that even be done today?
Sure. I think Attack of the Show would definitely have to be changed and tweaked for today's audience and today's media. A lot of things that were done back then may have been sort of considered okay within sort of cultural standards at the time. But I think, sort of the audience, the audiences has changed as well as the media. Like Attack of the Show, was sort of appointment television. You wanted to watch it live. And nowadays, nowadays everything's digital, everything's video on demand. So it's like, you don't watch it live. That's okay. I'll just jump in right now and start watching. So I think that's kind of one of the, the biggest, aspects you have to consider, as well as sort of just what is in the zeitgeist of today's audience, the Gen Z audience. What do they care about versus what people 10 years ago cared about? Do we really need to cover, Blog Watch, or do we really need to cover what's going on with Japan, which are just some of the segments I had to write on Attack of the Show? And the answer is no. There's something new. There's something different. I think, in terms of sort of content creation, before we had like a segment called Who's Who on YouTube. And nowadays it just wouldn't be YouTube. It's Who's Who on TikTok or Who's Who on Twitch. So it's basically, social media has grown so much. Digital content has grown so much, and the gaming industry and comic book industry has changed so much that I think you can do Attack of the Show, but you have to modernize it and tweak it to today's audience. Like I said, what may have worked 10 years ago wouldn't have the same resonance or meaning as it does now. But I think you can still have the spirit of Attack or G4, of it being irreverent and pop culture, centric and funny and have charm. But I it's definitely for a different audience and a different media.
That was great. You answered my next question, which was basically, can lightning strike twice? I believe it can, and it's going to resonate with a different audience. I don't know if you got to run, but
no, I got time if you want.
Okay, cool. One other bigger question to ask is about the cancellation of Attack, and how that news came down, how people reacted. I almost feel like, from where I sat, we kind of felt like, I think the feeling was, it's like, oh, it's going to be announced anytime. It was almost like a year. It was almost like a year of like, we're going to get canceled. Well, are we going to get canceled? It was like, it sort of dragged out. It was sort of like, at least in my single days, like a long breakup.
Are we gonna? Is this it? Is this the thing that breaks us up, or is like, oh, I guess we're still together?
Exactly. That was like, that was sort of the feeling. Was just like, oh, and then Kevin's gone. It's like, oh, it's over. And then it's like, it went on for like, was it 6-9 months or something after that? Like something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't until, so I had left that summer of 2012, and it still went on for like another 6 months until 2013. That's at that point it was just Matt, Myra, and Sarah and Candace going on. But yeah, I can speak to that sort of the process. Do you want me to get into sort of like the cable network or like bringing on like the switch to Esquire and
the details of that? And I'm getting different perspectives on that, and we're going to be doing. We're actually for the history moments, we're doing like some infographics to actually like say like here's the date when this happened, and like this is going to go through many set of eyes to be sure that there's factual accuracy. And when I get to that stage, if you want to be one of those people that looks at an early cut, I can show it to you.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but yeah, if you could speak to that, like sort of like what led to the cancellation, maybe where you fit in, because you left before the end. I was there up until the very end. Mm-hmm. I was on 3 episodes of Screensavers. Then I was on one of the first episodes of Attack of the Show, and I was there till the very end. Even though I knew behind the scenes they talked about changing and getting rid of me a couple times, which is fine. That kind of talk happens at every network.
Right, exactly.
I don't care. Take it personally. But tell me like what your knowledge was and kind of walk us through the cancellation and the end and what that felt like.
Sure. Working on Attack of the Show for 4 years, there was always some sort of impending doom that the network could go away, that we're going to get canceled, or that that the show's going to end. There were several scares throughout the period. My tenure there of doing I've seen a couple rounds of layoffs, and it was never a good sign. But the one thing that kept us going was just we loved working on the show, and we realized we were going to work on this and until the show's canceled or it was time for us to move on. So even after G4, which was acquired by Comcast, and then Comcast acquired NBC, even at that point, we thought, okay, cool, we are still the redheaded stepchildren, moving into the larger NBC Universal family versus, oh, hey, this could be great synergy. At the same time, it's, we always felt sort of like the outsider. So, anytime there was like a big shakeup or a big network change, it really didn't phase a lot of us because we were just there to make the show, and whatever happened, realizing that, all good things must come to an end. So we might as well enjoy it as long as you can while you can. But I think sort of the starting to see the nails of the coffin was when they brought on Adam Stotsky as sort of the new president. You're going to have to fact check me, as the new president of G4. And, him coming from Sci-Fi Channel, we really at first thought we were invigorated the idea that we're going to have a new president. He's going to want to take the network in the right direction. But then the bomb dropped that, we're going to turn it into the Esquire network. We're going to cater towards more affluent males aged, 18 to 35. And that was kind of sort of the first sign of like, okay, maybe I should start polishing up my resume. And so, I wasn't a part of like the corporate, upper level discussions, but just from working in the trenches, we just knew that they weren't exactly providing a lot of information towards us. So we just kind of kept going along with the show. And then it was around the summer of 2012 when we really started seeing, the iceberg, coming up ahead. I believe it was the first sign was Adam Sessler's contract not being renewed. Adam was told that he was no longer going to be on X-Play. And then then when Kevin Pereira's contract wasn't re-signed and that his last day would be, right before E3, that's kind of when we knew, okay, the network doesn't care about us, or they have different plans for us. So, it's this could be it. So, after Kevin's last day, that was kind of sort of the nail in the coffin for me personally. So that's kind of like when my family and I decided to move out to the East Coast. But I still kind of followed along and watched, what was happening with Attack of the Show, as I was friends with everyone there and I loved everyone. But just seeing those last couple months of G4 kind of, wither away without the support of the network or the studio or the new direction, it was really sad that kind of the network, that the show and the network kind of ended the way it did versus, where it was a decision by the higher ups versus something else happening and like, okay, we're getting canceled, but everyone's on board with it. So like I said, it was really heartbreaking to watch the cancellation of a show that I loved so much working on, watching, and the people I worked with. But it was really a great time, and you have to appreciate it for what it was.
It's good. I appreciate it. That's the perspective I'm getting from a lot of people. Is it was heartbreaking. It was like, yeah. I mean, I was there, and I was there for the last show. It felt weird.
Yeah.
So I think I've covered everything that I wanted to hit with in the questions. Is there anything I didn't cover that you think is important for people to know about your experience on Attack of the Show and your perspective from having been there? Because I know that every time you get interviewed for a job and someone sees Attack of the Show on your resume, people ask about it, because that happens to me.
Yeah.
They're like, now I just like, Film Thread is my full-time job. Actually, yeah. It's my business. And, but whenever anyone is like, oh, like, yeah, Attack of the Show, that's what the impetus for doing this documentary was, being asked about Attack of the Show so many times, with the main question being, whatever happened to Attack of the Show? Like, was the impetus for doing this doc initially was I wanted to answer that question so I didn't have to have a long conversation with people that can see the movie. But what are your thoughts, and like what is there anything I didn't ask that you really feel is important that people should know about your experience?
No, but I can speak to that. After working on having Attack of the Show on your resume is kind of having a badge of honor or an honor of metal to certain groups and communities. Wherever I've gone, wherever I've worked, whenever something within that genre pops up and G4 and Attack of the Show gets mentioned, whenever I mention that I worked on the show, it is suddenly like 20 questions about, oh my God, how was Olivia? Oh my God, you still talk to Kevin? Oh my God, how did they do this? Or what was that? So it was really an honor to have worked on that show, because it also just proves how much influence and how far it reached out to other people. So, I currently work in, the gaming and esports industry. As soon as they see G4 in my resume, it's like an automatic, or it's not an automatic, invitation for the job, but it's an automatic, conversation starter. It's also amongst to other people in the industry knowing, wow, you worked on a grueling show, a live daily grueling show. I'm sure you can handle this. Or, wow, you really worked on something amazing. And it kind of, it just shows that, it just shows that how much G4 has affected and influenced, everyone who worked there and everyone who was a part of it.
You couldn't have summed it up any better. That's awesome. That's great. Chris Jalandoni. I got it right. Thank you for talking to me.
It's only been 8 years, Chris.
It's only been 8 years. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna end the recording right now.
Okay, cool. I'll stop mine.